A tragedy that should be stopped. That's how the war in Ukraine was described at the virtual G20 summit on Wednesday by the man who started that conflict, Russian President Vladimir Putin. Now, irony aside, he also tried to use the fighting between Israel and Hamas to push his own line on Ukraine. Claire Sebastian explains.
Well, this was the first time since Russia launched its war in Ukraine that President Vladimir Putin has addressed a G20 summit. And it comes as the conflict in Gaza has significantly reduced international scrutiny of Russia's actions in Ukraine, something Putin attempted to capitalize on.
Several colleagues in their presentations have talked about how shocked they are by seeing Russia's ongoing aggression in Ukraine. Yes, of course, military action is always a tragedy for specific people, specific families, and the country as a whole. And of course, we should think about how to stop this tragedy. By the way, Russia never refused to hold peace talks with Ukraine. And what about the bloody coup in Ukraine in 2014, followed by the war of the Kyiv regime against its people in Donbass? Isn't this shocking? Isn't the extermination of the civilian population in Palestine and the Gaza Strip shocking today?
Well, that kind of whataboutism is common from Putin. The comment that, quote, we should think about how to stop this tragedy, though, is more unusual. But it's not clear that Putin is overtly calling for peace talks here. Ukraine ruled out peace talks with Putin last year after Russia held a ceremony illegally annexing 4 occupied regions in Ukraine, nearly a fifth of the country. And Putin has repeatedly used that to accuse Ukraine of getting in the way of peace. This seems like more of that rhetoric. But it's also clear that this is a moment when Putin may feel emboldened. Ukraine has not liberated any significant amount of territory in a year. Russia still has more manpower and industrial capacity, despite the efforts of Ukraine's allies. And it will, of course, be keenly aware of the paralysis in the US Congress over funding and some signs of fatigue among Ukraine's European allies. While Ukraine, for its part, is unwavering on its stance on peace talks. In a recent social media post, the foreign minister calling Putin a, quote, habitual liar, saying no one can seriously use the words Russia and negotiations in the same phrase. Claire Sebastian, CNN, London.
Meandering through the marshlands of Kherson region in southern Ukraine is the mighty Dnipro River, now the new front line in Ukraine's war against Russia. In recent weeks, Marines have managed to cross this expanse of water using inflatable boats, establishing a tenuous foothold on the left bank of the river. Hey, am I in Vietnam? Asked this soldier sarcastically, brushing past tall grasses. A reference to another bloody conflict that ended before most of these soldiers were even born. According to Ukrainian armed forces, they've pushed back the Russians 3 to 8 kilometres, 2 to 5 miles from the riverfront, making it difficult for the enemy to fire mortars at positions on the right bank. However, Russian drones, artillery and aerial glided bombs are still landing, and constantly. In exclusive access with drone pilot Serhiy, his night mission had just been aborted because the Russians had identified his unit's position on the right bank. Hunkered down in his pickup, hiding under trees from Russian birds above, the 32-year-old former journalist tells me they're under constant bombardment.
What are you hearing?
Explosions. Now there is an attack on the place where I am. There are kamikaze drones, I think it's Shaheds, rockets, most likely Grads, mortars and tanks. It's always like that here. Today they are using guided aerial bombs. Do you hear it too? That's another one. I think it was a rocket.
The job of his aerial reconnaissance unit is to provide cover for Marines crossing the river and to watch the enemy on the other side.
Do you feel safe where you are?
No.
It's dangerous here, where we live and where we work. Every time I enter the zone, I say goodbye to my life. But I realize that my life can be ended at any moment. You get used to it, but it's unpleasant.
The reason this left bank operation is so important for Ukraine is to open the road to Russian-occupied Crimea and to protect the nearby city of Kherson. A year ago, the Russians withdrew from Kherson, using the Dnipro River as a defendable natural barrier between the two sides. But in the last month, attacks on Kherson have intensified to the point where the region's military governor told me there were 700 incoming rounds in one day. This is revenge, and now it's felt more, he says, because our soldiers are already on the left bank and our civilians are feeling this revenge. 300,000 residents used to live in Kherson. Now less than a quarter remain, including 56-year-old Inna. She cares for her invalid mother and her 4-year-old grandson. 24 hours a day, it's scary. When it's quiet, it's even scarier than when there is shelling. She says she lived through 8 months of Russian occupation and will endure this as well. Our main task is to survive, she explains. That was the priority during the occupation, and it's the same thing now. We have to survive. A daily struggle for a population that's being constantly terrorised. Anna Koren, CNN, Kyiv.
Turning now to the war in Ukraine, US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin is now in Kyiv for an unannounced visit. This is Austin's second trip to Kyiv since Russia invaded in February 2022. According to the Defense Department, he's expected to meet Ukraine's leadership for talks and, quote, reinforce the staunch support of the United States for Ukraine's fight for freedom. And CNN's Anna Koren joined us now live from Kyiv. Good to see you again, Anna. So what more are you learning about US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin's surprise visit to Kyiv?
Rosemary, he arrived this morning. He'll be meeting with the Defence Minister today, then on to see President Zelensky for high-level talks. He'll then be going to the US Embassy, and then he'll be meeting with the press later this evening. Look, this visit, as you say, the second time he's been to Ukraine since Russia's invasion in February of last year, is really a shot in the arm for the Ukrainians. They've been feeling quite neglected, these past few months, particularly with the war in Israel. So the Defence Secretary being here in person, giving FaceTime, reaffirming America's support is exactly what Ukraine needs right now. Rosemary, this is a difficult point in the war. We are in the 21st month. That is how long this war has been going for. We are approaching winter. Look, they don't talk about death tolls, but we know that there are mass casualties taking place on the eastern and southern front of this war. The counter-offensive that has been going on for the past 4 months has not yielded the results or made those significant breakthroughs that had been touted when it all began. So really, with Austin being here in person, they will discuss the vision moving forward, what 2024 is going to look like. They have to get through winter first. But obviously that US funding bill before Congress for $61 billion that President Biden wants to push through, that is something that President Zelensky will want an update on. Where is that going? How is it going? So obviously Defence Secretary Austin will be delivering that news for him. From the experts, Rosemary, that I've spoken to, if that $61 billion gets through Congress, and we know the headwinds that it faces with the Republican Party, that will certainly fund Ukraine's war effort for next year.
And Anna, what is the latest on Ukraine's claim of significant gains on the Dnipro River front?
Look, this is a significant operation. There is no doubt about it. In the last few weeks, the Marines have managed to cross this river, the Dnipro River, in Kherson region, and have made a foothold on the left bank. They've managed to even push back Russian forces 3 to 8 kilometres. That's according to Ukrainian armed forces. Now, can they hold it? We just don't know. It's tenuous, to say the least. We spoke to a Marine last night, Rosemary, who was conducting a drone operation, and we could hear the bombardment, the Russian bombardment, as we were talking. He said that the situation is incredibly difficult. And he was on the right bank of the river, let alone the left bank, where there are Ukrainian Marines trying to hold onto this territory. They obviously want to push back the Russians so that they can't hit the city of Kherson the way that they are hitting it at present. It's a current, constant, I should say, bombardment. We spoke to the governor of Kherson, who said last week on one day they had 700 strikes. I mean, this is about terrorising the population, but it's not just about protecting the city. They are trying to push back the Russians to cut off the supply, if you like, that the Russians are getting from Crimea. So look, this is a work in progress. This is something that they can certainly tout as a victory, a significant breakthrough at the moment. Can they hold it? Time will tell. Among the woods filled with maple and oak trees, now almost bare, is one of Kyiv's oldest cemeteries. A soldier arrives, back from the battlefield for only a day. He's here to visit his son and see the new monument that stands over his grave.
It's what my son wanted. Must be a Cossack cross. Simple and ordinary and traditional.
His son was Roman Rotushny, one of Ukraine's most prominent activists. What ignited the fire in the then 16-year-old was the Maidán revolution.
I think that he was this person all this time. Maidán just helped him to conduct this transformation.
On the 21st of November 2013, a few hundred people gathered at Maidán, Independence Square, to protest against the government's decision not to sign an association agreement with the European Union. Then President Viktor Yanukovych had ditched closer ties with Europe and pivoted towards Russian President Vladimir Putin. Within weeks, the protests swelled as thousands of people took over Maidán. Police violence intensified over the next 3 months, until riot police, using live rounds, opened fire, killing more than 100 protesters.
The youngest of them was 17, the oldest was 82. There were people from all over Ukraine, from different professions, with different education. I think this is a collective image of Ukrainian heroes, and they all died for the same values.
In the following months, Putin would occupy Crimea and covertly back separatists in eastern Ukraine. Maidán had set in motion a series of events that would reshape Ukraine and alter the course of history. What began here in Kyiv 10 years ago was the start of Ukraine's fight to join the European Union. Well, that struggle continues to this day, but the stakes are so much higher as this country fights for its mere existence. Next month, EU leaders will meet to decide whether Ukraine should be given membership, and so far, the signs are promising.
The future of Ukraine is in the European Union. The future that the Maidán fought for has finally just begun.
When the Russians launched their full-scale invasion on Ukraine on the 24th of February last year, a 24-year-old Roman immediately signed up with the military.
Thank you for support again.
First fighting in the defence of Kyiv, he then joined the 93rd Combat Brigade stationed in the east. His father and older brother also enlisted, but were located elsewhere. On the phone, Roman would tell his family all was fine, but they knew everything was far from okay. On the 8th of June last year, Roman was killed during a reconnaissance mission. 2 weeks before his death, he wrote his last will and testament on a sheet of A4 paper, stating what he wanted for his funeral: the ceremony, the music, the monument.
My thoughts are always with him. I wish him to be with me.
Even in death, he continues to inspire young Ukrainians and remains a beacon of hope for a father full of sorrow.
He sounded like such an incredible young man, you know, a future leader of this country.
Yes, exactly. And his time was very short.
But in that short time, Roman always knew what he was fighting for.
For me, all that was not in vain. I see a huge number of positive changes in this country, and they happen only thanks to Maidán.
Anna Koren, CNN, Kyiv.